So as I noted, the topic of today's discussion is resident leadership in community development. So One Neighborhood Builders is planning to share some of our learnings from Leadership Academy work that we have done, as well as other related initiatives, which are really aimed at building skills and knowledge so that residents can effectively harness and activate their power in influencing decisions that impact their lives and communities. We're also joined by a handful of panelists with expertise and experience in other leadership programs in Rhode Island, all of whom I am very excited about and will introduce shortly. So my first panelist I'd like to introduce is Lucy Berman, who is the manager of the Central Providence Opportunities Health Equity Zone at One Neighborhood Builders. Lucy, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and then speak to the role of resident leadership in One Neighborhood Builders' community building work?
Yes. Hi, Grace. Thank you for the introduction. Hi, everybody. As Grace said, my name is Lucy Berman, and I'm the CPO-HES project manager. And I've been at One Neighborhood Builders for about a year. My background is largely in community organizing. So this concept of resident leadership is really core to me and how I approached my work. That being said, I'm certainly not an expert in this topic. I'm speaking from the experiences that I've had in this last year and in my professional experience before that, but I'm also really excited to learn from the other panelists and hear what you all have to say about this topic as well. Briefly, I'd say that there are two key ways that resident leadership development is integrated into our community building work. The first is that CPO-HES convenes a resident advisory council. That's a group of now 12 residents from the 02908 and 02909 zip codes who help guide and advise our work. And also through leadership academies. So this summer, I'll talk about this a little bit more later if we have the time, but I'm helping to lead a youth leadership academy through a program called Building Leaders, Building Communities. And we've given it the catchy title, Planting Seeds. So those are the two key ways that residents are involved in our community building team, though there's also other things I haven't mentioned.
Thank you, Lucy. And we'll get into all those other things, I'm sure, as we talk here. Next, I want to introduce Faith David, who is the Coordinator Outreach Liaison for the Parent Leadership Training Institute at Community Action Partnership of Providence County. Faith, thanks for joining us. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and kind of what brought you to working in the resident and community leadership work?
Good morning. My name is Faith David. I am the site coordinator for Parent Leadership Training Institute here at Community Action Partnership of Providence County, CAP. I'm originally from a tiny country in West Africa, Liberia. I always believe in empowering parents or individuals because I always tell myself and I tell parents that I work with that if you don't gain your voice, others will make decisions for you. And that's the last thing you want, because those decisions that they will make will not be decisions that will conform with your beliefs and your values. But at the end of the day, those are things that you will have to live by. And believing in that is what drew me into parent leadership training. Parent leadership training is a 22 weeks training program here at CAP. It is national. We do have PLTI throughout the United States. We train parents in civic democracy training program. We gave them the opportunity to have their voices heard and to advocate for their community, for children and youth as a whole. And that's basically what I do here at CAP. And those are my beliefs also.
Thank you, Faith. We're also joined, our third and final panelist is Brittany Lizotte. Brittany is a graduate of the Parent Leadership Training Institute at CAP and has recently also begun a role as Director of Communications at CAP alongside Faith. Brittany, thanks for joining us. We'd love to hear a little bit about you and how you got involved in the Training Institute and some things that you learned along the way.
Definitely. Thank you so much, Grace, and thank you to all the other panelists. I, of course, have had the pleasure of working with Faith very closely, and that has been awesome. My background actually is I grew up in Rhode Island, and then I went to college in New York. I graduated from the new school in December of 2019 and was living in New York, really trying to get things going there, had a network there. And then, of course, the pandemic hit. So everything got a little bit funky there. Couldn't really find a job. A lot of people in my community moved away. Um, it was very difficult. And ultimately, at the end of 2020, I moved back to Providence to live with my mom. And I was working at Urban Greens Food Co-op and ended up doing some work with Faith and our former communications director to kind of highlight and market PLTI. And I was really inspired. I hadn't really seen anything like that since I'd been in school. And it had been really hard to like get myself interacting in the community because, personally, things had just gone a little bit awry. So I decided to start the class, and it was really awesome because everybody, first of all, was incredibly accepting, incredibly present in the program. And it was the first educational situation that I'd been in that was not very competitive. It wasn't people focused on, their careers. It was everybody focused on really helping each other, because ultimately, if we each do our own thing really well in our community, it just gets better. So everybody that I've graduated with, a few of whom work at CAP and a few of whom are just out in the community, we all really support each other. We have events. We'll see each other at the farmers market. It's really wonderful, and it has played a huge role in my trajectory in my life, but also in my feeling of being at home in the city.
Thank you, Brittany.
Of course.
We may also be joined at some point by Leah Stuckey, who is a member of One Neighborhood Builders' Resident Advisory Council. I don't see Leah in the room right now. If you're here, Leah, shout it out. And if not, she joins, I'll introduce her along the way. But in the meantime, I want to turn it back to Lucy. Lucy, you mentioned kind of briefly the Planting Seeds program that One Neighborhood Builders is currently leading, which is focused on youth leadership development in Central Providence. Can you talk a little bit about the importance of kind of differentiating programs for youth and for other populations, and kind of the way that that really supports individuals in really accessing the skills and knowledge that we anticipate they will receive through these programs?
Yeah, I think that's really key. Building resident leadership development efforts around shared identities and shared experiences. And I mean, especially with youth, this is my first time working with a group of teenagers, and it has certainly been a learning experience for me already, and definitely validates the fact that it's good that they're in a room together. And while they're all youth from Central Providence, there's still a wide variety of ages in the group. We've got 13-year-olds to 17-year-olds, and the dynamics are really fascinating to see between them, because the 17-year-olds, I think, feel more power and control in the room because there are younger people in the room, but then the younger ones feel more power and control because they're in a room with older people, and they don't usually get to be. But I think most importantly, I'd say one logistical thing is that recruitment is easier for these sorts of things if you target a really specific group of people, or people with a similar set of experiences. The example that we got from NeighborWorks when we got the grant to do this training was like BIPOC Gen Xers come to this Resident Leadership Academy, or LGBTQ plus parents. And the reason for that is, first of all, people are drawn more to programs that like feel more targeted towards them, but also people who have similar identities or experiences often have the same obstacles or challenges, and may be able to together generate solutions or ideas that are better together than they would be able to do alone. And so where I really bring this all together is that I think it gets to the difference between empowerment and more something along the lines of community activation. I try to think less about empowerment because it's like, I don't have like a pool of power that I get to bestow onto people who participate. It's more that each individual has so much power in themselves already, in their passions, their talents, their skills. And where that really becomes power is when those connections are made between people who have shared issues and have shared values and shared goals. So I think when you bring together people with a common set of experiences or identities, they're able to make those connections with each other and realize that they're a lot stronger together, and together they're stronger than whatever they feel is holding them down.
Thank you, Lucy. Brittany, I'm wondering if you might speak to the experience of going through the Parent Leadership Training Institute towards that end. You know, there's sort of a focused idea with which that specific leadership training program is developed. And could you maybe tell us a little bit about what some of that focus looked like and how that impacted your participation in the program?
Yes, for sure. So it is interesting because I'm thinking, I guess, of like what PLTI, their audience focus would be. And of course, that would be parents. I personally am not a parent, but they encourage, you know, whoever would be interested in advocating for children or families or, you know, individuals in that way to apply and join the program. And that was really lovely. First of all, it did get me involved with people that I might not have met otherwise. And to kind of learn a little bit more about their experiences and, you know, think about, oh, what would it be like if there was a police officer in my child's school? You know, what would it have been like if there was a police officer in my school growing up? Just certain things that, you know, in my day-to-day, I wouldn't necessarily think about without having these other things to trigger that thought. It was interesting because Providence was a focus, Rhode Island was a focus. We went, you know, strategically through who is in our local government, you know, how the wards are broken up, how you can effectively create change within your exact space and ultimately for the larger state. So that was interesting. It kind of gave everybody, you know, their own platform. Everybody had like a community project that was specific to their interests, and they could follow that. And then they would think of like, oh yeah, you know, I go to Urban Greens. I know this person who might be able to support your project or things of that nature. So it's interesting because it's not exactly as concentrated a group, but it draws people focused on similar things, if that makes sense.
Absolutely, yes. And Faith, I wanted to ask you is, of course, the one who's working closely with all of the participants in the Parent Leadership Training Institute and kind of your experience more broadly with resident leadership. What are some of the this kind of specific things that you hope and your colleagues hope individuals will get out of a leadership training program like this? Like, what are the goals that you see, and how does it connect to CAP's mission more broadly?
CAP mission, which is helping residents to become economic self-sufficient, but it also goes beyond just rendering services, because the intent of CAP is at some point in time, you can stand up on your own 2 feet, that you aren't just on the receiving end. And that's CAP's focus. And PLTI sort of puts parents or residents in that position. It allows you to gain your self-identity. It allows you to gain that self-respect. Everyone walked out of, you woke up in the morning and you looked in the mirror and you ask yourself, who am I? What it is that I hope to achieve? What it is that I want to be known for? That which gives me pride. PLTI kind of puts you and nudge you in that direction, because it's just like Brittany said, it's just not like a regular classroom setting. At PLTI training, we tell the participants that We do know you already have what it takes. We're only here to nudge you in that direction, because too often people know what they want. They just don't know how to get what it is that they want. There's so many services here in Rhode, but those services aren't out there and so available to those who need it. So oftentimes people fall by the wayside, not knowing that these services are there for them, that they can tap into this and be better of who they are. And PLTI does guide you in that direction. We do have two phases in PLTI. It's 20 weeks, but it's once a week. And you have phase 1 and you have phase 2. In each of those phases, there are intense topics that are discussed. We have striving with diversity. At the first day of the session, when diversity, the issue of diversity was brought up, you could see the how tense the participant were, that some were willing to speak of it, some felt it was too close to home to speak of it, and others had never experienced it before. They've never understood what it is, like Brittany said, to have a cop in your child's school or in your school for that matter. Some parents never experience it. Some parents never experience being stopped by a cop, how to react, whereas some have, and they didn't want initially to talk about it. But as the session rolled by and people started to open up and talk, everyone was able to open up, and they felt comfortable knowing that they are in a space where they can hear from different perspectives. They can hear from those who don't understand, and they can also, and those who don't understand can hear from them. And PLTI, when we push towards diversity, Black, Brown, Caucasian, we accept all, because we believe that giving voice to residents should not be just limited to Black or Brown. In order to break the circle of full understanding, we must go beyond the normal divide. We must go beyond just understanding that, well, if I'm Black and Brown, I can only be in this group. And if I'm Caucasian, I can only be in this group. So PLTI kind of broke all of that away. And at the end of the day, in order to complete PLTI, each resident must have a community project. We don't tell you what the project should be, because we want you to look within your community, because we believe that you came to PLTI already knowing what it is that you wanted to do. You just didn't know how to go about doing it. And so we allow you to go such yourself, come back, tell us what project you want to do. And then we work with you and guide you towards the completion. We don't just stop there. We do have the alumni group. In this alumni group, these are diverse individuals within the alumni group, and their intent is they become ambassadors of PLTI. They push PLTI mission forward while completing and advocating for their community project and other issues that within communities that are of primary concern.
Thank you, Faith. And I think you actually answered a little bit one of the questions that came up in the chat during your discussion from Rochelle, which was about kind of how the longevity of this program. PLTI has been in Rhode Island for more than 20 years, and interested in how that alumni network, how folks stay in touch, what that really looks like for PLTI. So would love to hear if there's anything else that you wanted to share on that front. And I will say I think your mic was a little staticky going in and out. So I don't know if that's okay.
Yeah,
See you laughing.
I think it's better now because it was at the back. It's better now, right?
That sounds better.
Okay, all right.
Thank you.
Thank you. I apologize.
No problem. Could you talk a little bit about that, keeping in touch with graduates and kind of how that contributes to the goals of the work, really, you know, maintaining and kind of building the connections over time as folks go through the program?
Like I said, we do have the alumni group. They do have their own leadership. They are now pushing towards elections again for new court of officers. But we at CAP, what we do is we work with them. All of these participants who've completed their community projects. For example, we have one of the residents. One of the things that she realized in Rhode Island was, in Providence, was that playgrounds. She said the playgrounds most of them are accessible to regular kids. Kids with disability, kids who struggle, don't really have access to these playgrounds. It's frustrating for the parents and the social worker who work with these kids. So that is her community project, advocating for that. She has had a couple of meetings, and so we're working with her. We push her towards more networking so that this idea can be pushed forward, so that the park, those who are responsible for the different parks, can come to grasp and say, well, after all of these years, these parks that we have here aren't accessible to these kids. It's so unfair to them. How can we change that? That's one of the advocates that she's pushing for. We do have another individual who, her community project that she wrote on, she calls that building blocks. Kids who leave foster care at the age of 18. What happened to these kids? One too often they fall back into the cracks because the system that's lined up for them often isn't so available for them. So her community project is, I will start working with these kids, teaching them how to, if they can read and write, how to do the resume, how to apply for jobs, how to understand what it is to bank, how to improve their credit. That is her community project, because this is something that she has seen. She was once a foster mom, and she got to a full understanding. And she felt, well, if my foster daughter, what I've done for her, I realized her friends didn't have the same opportunity. So I can push on this. It can become my community project. And that's excellent idea. We also have another who's her community project is within the community. She said that I have 6 kids, and I understand what it is to not have hygiene supplies, or to go to school and you aren't able to even do laundry. So she's been fortunate. She now has one of the rooms at 360 High School. They've given her this room that she's now going out and scouting for different supplies that she'll be able to help kids, that when they come to school, they can now have access to getting detergent or getting sanitary pad that they can use, because the reality is there. We know that people live off of food stamps, but food stamps does not allow you to get these other things that you need. And people just think, well, if you can have food stamp, it means you're okay. People are struggling, and the pandemic didn't make it easy, it made it worse. So these are just 3 of the community projects that I can tell you about. So much amazing. There is even one who realized that she's in an 02909 community, and she said during the pandemic, what happened was their after school programs were all shut down. Kids started to become and get involved in unbecoming behavior. And she felt, I can push that this center has to open. I have to advocate. And so what she did, she started writing letters. We work with you. We want to see those letters that you write. We want to see when you launch your community project, we are there with you. The other participants are also there. Like Brittany said, they support each other. So they are also there. And what they also do is they don't just limit their work to each individual community project, but PLTI Alumni Group has 3 pillars that they work with. That's education, health, and housing. So they also advocate for that. Now, these residents or these graduates, initially, they understood all of these problems. They know that they're there, but they didn't know where to go, how to seek help. They didn't know that. So PLTI kind of pushed them, because when we get to local administration, we do have guest speakers that come in. We have local government, members of the government that come in. We have local representative. We have senators. They come in telling them that this is how local government work. So these participants take that idea with them and say, well, now we know how laws are made and how they are passed. So before these laws are made, we don't understand what a city councilman does, not just what he tells us, not just coming and sticking his sign in our yard and that we vote, but we also know, and we now know how to keep our local administrators accountable. We know how to keep their feet to the fire for what it is that we want to be able to advocate for our children. And CAP, we continue to work with them. We don't just graduate you, hand you all your certificate and these beautiful citations and say, well, we're done. No, we work with you because it's a continuous process, and we know every year as we go along, there's change. These things need to happen. And like I said before, one of the greatest things that I tell all of the participants, if you don't speak up, someone's going to make those decisions for you, and you may not like them. But then at the end of the day, you're going to have yourself to blame because you didn't speak up.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. It's really great to hear both kind of some of the specific projects that folks who've gone through the program and are now alumni have led, but also just how you think about that sort of, compounding of power over time as folks graduate and those networks kind of continue. I want to open it up for questions as we're getting to the last 15 minutes here. But as we do so, I also wanted to acknowledge, I'm looking at the chat and seeing all the wonderful, fabulous community leaders and supporters of community leadership partners that are here in the room. So I welcome those of you who will work in this field in your own respective organizations to also jump in with thoughts and comments in addition to questions as we go into the last 15 minutes. I'm going to start with Dominic because you've very patiently had your virtual hand raised for the last few moments. Go ahead and share your question.
So thank you very much, Grace. I have a question for Faith and Lucy. How do you get people initially to come? Do you use food? Do you use gift certificates? Once you get them in front of you, you got them. You two are great. And I can see how you would bring them in, but you have to get them to the first meeting where they can then start to hear what you can do and get involved. How do you get them there to start? What brings them in?
Okay. I just started. I've been with CAP for 2 years. The last year was the first cohort that I conducted. So I asked the same question when I joined CAP. How do you do recruitment? How do you get it started? So I said, well, the answers that I got weren't so definite. So I said, look, Faith, you have to do it your way. I went ahead, printed flyers, and then I decided where do I find most of the parents? Where do I find people that will be interested? I thought about the rec centers. People do take their kids to the rec during the summer camp. Check out the rec centers. So I visited all 12 rec centers in Providence, taking off flyers, having a sit down with parents, telling them what it is, what PLTI is about. And then I went to Providence Educational School System. I was able, when our previous director for communications here, she sat on the board. So I told her, hey, whenever you're having these meetings, I need to come by and need to have word to be able to talk about PLTI. And then came the alumni because they're ambassadors for PLTI. So I had to go back to them and tell them, hey, we're about to start a new phase. We need you. Your experience, because you are the best person to speak of your experience and to tell people what PLTI is about. And that's how we went about recruitment. We didn't do food per se. We do have a food pantry. We did take flyers there, had to sit down, with them, but we kind of use, or I kind of use different forms of recruitment.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I think what Faith is getting at there is the importance of going to people rather than just expecting them to come to you, and building on those places that are hubs for folks to already gather, the ones that you're looking for, and building on existing relationships so that it's more of a personalized recruitment conversation rather than just, I'm looking for anybody. But to your question also about incentives, is there food? First of all, yes, always food. Is there a stipend? Is there any money associated? We decided to include a stipend for the students participating in the Youth Leadership Academy this summer. They're receiving $40 a session and then a $100 completion bonus. And there were a couple of reasons why we wanted to do that. First of all, to get folks to sign up, obviously. Second of all, to show young people from the time that they're 13 on, that their time is valuable and their input is, worth compensating them for, that we're not just trying to extract from them in, a classic capitalist fashion, but actually show them that they have value. And it's been cool to see, even just in the first 3 sessions, some of the students were really open and honest at the first session. They were like, I came for the money. And one student in particular who really upfront, actually Leah, who isn't here, but one of our co-facilitators has started just giving her the nickname Money because she was so on the money in the first session. We had a homework assignment for the first session to the second session. It was have a conversation with somebody in your life using these skills that we've learned in the first session. Second session, we come back, we start out saying, can everybody share back the results of this first assignment, this conversation you had? One person did the assignment. It was this girl. And she was so excited about sharing back what she learned about her friends and her sister when she had this conversation with them. And I think that sometimes it's important to have an incentive to get someone's foot in the door. And then if they are able along the way to feel more confident with the sound of their own voice, or have a sense that the world is malleable and they have the power to change it, even if that's not what they were expecting when they first came in, they were really just coming for the check, that's a huge win too. So
Thank you.
And just when it comes to, I just want to interject this part of it. The session we had were virtual. Prior to having virtual sessions, they were all in person, and there were times for dinner. So we realizing that, hey, if we're virtual, what are we going to do? This is on the Thursday. These parents or residents have to take care of their families. So we had gift cards. We were able to get one of our funders to fund that part of it. We had gift cards that we gave to them to be able to get healthy meals. And then we had activity baskets for those who had kids, because we wanted the parents to be so involved. So we felt that when you were in session, hey, give your kids these activity baskets. They are also engaged in their activities while you are in session, because we didn't want to take away that part from the residents or the parents to say, oh, well, I have to struggle. I have to come home and fix dinner and I cannot do this. So we're like, hey, we got you. Meal, we can take care of that. We're going to keep your kids engaged so that you can concentrate on your session. And that's what we did.
Thank you both. And thanks for the question, Dominic. I want to acknowledge a question from Janice for Lucy about Smith Hill residents who are involved in the Youth Leadership Academy. I don't want to put you on the spot, Lucy, so I'm actually going to recommend that maybe the two of you can connect outside of this conversation, because I think it's a great idea, Janice, given I know you noted in the chat you're a longtime Smith Hill resident, to kind of talk about the connection of Smith Hill folks in the various work that we're doing. I also want to raise another question that's on my mind, and would encourage folks to keep jumping in, which is something that came up in my conversations that I had before this session with Faith, Lucy, and Brittany, and others, was that this is, as important as this work is, it's also very hard. And we don't want to kind of sugarcoat the fact that the work that Faith and Lucy have done to to have success through their respective programs, and then the work of participants themselves, as Brittany has gone through, is it doesn't always go as planned. It's there's no end date. You never plant a flag and say, we're done, we did it. So I would love for the three of you, if you have any reflections or thoughts on that, and the kind of persistence that it requires to really push this work forward. I think that would be a really kind of interesting reflection for folks on this call.
I would say for me, when I look back, yes, it's not an easy job. You have to always put yourself in the position of the residents. That's something that sometimes it becomes difficult, but just stop, breathe, and ask yourself, if I was in the position, what would I do? Because you hear different stories. Then you have to keep in contact. So I made it my duty, one of the things to kind of de-stress myself and breathe, and Brittany can attest to it. What I would do is that I send out emails every week. And I always go and I kind of download some fun emoji or something fun. So that when you see my email, you can like, oh, here she goes again. No, the first thing is you see maybe the sun telling you how beautiful the day is, what are you going to do? And then I can go and dive into my email. And if it's Thanksgiving, I have a turkey running. I just do something fun that I sent into my email. I send text messages, print up cards. If there's an event for someone, how do we celebrate them? It's a lot of work. It can be intense. It can be stressful. But at the end of the day, you're going to ask yourself, why am I here? So once you have answered that to yourself, you know that you're going to get up, dust it up, and go again the next day. Because when you interact with your residents, you do get a full understanding how much they have come over the period of time to appreciate what you were doing for them. Because initially it doesn't look that way. You're going to, like Lucy said, you're going to have those who like, this is not what I want. Am I really here for them? This is a waste of my time. But it also has to do with you, the coordinator, how you interact with your residents that will keep them wanting to be more involved and wanting to listen to you and be so excited and just not on the receiving end of the gift card or what the gift you have to give, but beyond that point.
Yeah, I would definitely say that. Oh, I'm sorry, Lucy.
Go ahead.
One thing that PLTI really stressed a lot was the importance of process and how it will always kind of ebb and flow. So even, my community project I like, but I haven't really taken it off the ground because I'm just not really totally there yet. I needed to get a job, needed to figure that out. And then hopefully at some point I will get there. But I've taken a lot of joy and just experience out of working with the people in my class who have done their projects, which Faith mentioned earlier. And one of them too, like had set up this whole event, got people to come, got a bunch of local partnerships to have tables set up. And she was a little bit disappointed by the turnout of, residents and stuff. And I was just looking around like, this is so huge. You know what I mean? Even if you just got those tables set up, even if you just got, 10 people to come, how important is it that you did just this work? Now, next year it'll be easier. People will know about it. People will know what they're coming to, things like that. And it's just like, it's so important to give yourself those little wins because it was much harder to do it than to not do it. So as cliche as that might sound, it really was a big push in PLTI.
I have two things I want to add real quick. First, building on Faith's point about knowing why you're doing this work and like what brings you there. Something that the Resident Advisory Council members raised recently was that they wanted to acknowledge that the stakes are different for them versus the people at One Neighborhood Builders who are trying to implement the work that they're suggesting, right? And I live in Federal Hill, but I grew up in Connecticut. And one of the residents who I was speaking to was talking about how throughout her childhood, her family got evicted from every apartment in Olneyville that she lived in. The impact of the work that we're doing is directly on her. And I want to be good at my job, and I'm guided by my Jewish values, and I'm guided by what I know is wrong in the world and what I want to see change. But the stakes are different. And so I think like really, really grounding yourself in why you're doing the work that you're doing is essential. And I think has to be a constant reminder in terms of sustaining yourself through it. And then I'd also say in terms of continuing engagement and building on the leadership development that you start, it's important to come up with new strategies and build on what you're learning. So we, through the Resident Advisory Council, distributed $100,000 in grants through what was called the Community Impact Fund last fall. And the members of our RAC got to vote on how that money would be spent and what projects it would fund. And we got a lot of feedback from that, we could have had more wide participation, that there could have been more of a thoughtful, pre-vote educational process to understand exactly how budgeting works and how the money was going to be used and how to make these sorts of decisions. So we are about to launch a year-long participatory budgeting process to allocate $1 million in Central Providence. And residents will have a chance over the course of the year to help make key decisions about what the process itself looks like. Pitch ideas, turn those ideas into full proposals, decide which ones go on the ballot, and then vote on the projects that they want to see funded in their community. So we're building on the experiences we've learned before, listening to feedback and trying to iterate based on that to be more responsive to community needs.
Thank you, Lucy. And thank all of you for joining. I know Dominic has one final question in the chat, which I'm not going to ask folks to answer now just because we're getting towards the end, but I will follow up with you, Dominic, and if anyone else who's interested in understanding how both CAP and One Neighborhood Builders think about finding speakers, and it sounds like a little interest in how folks might get involved in these programs moving forward. But as we're at 9:30, I just want to thank Faith and Brittany and Lucy for their time and expertise and their willingness to share it here. And I want to thank all of you for joining a session that's on top of all of your existing work and things that pull your attention every week on a Friday morning. And we look forward to seeing you at future sessions, which we'll be announcing through our website and through our communications channel. And we'll be sure that all of you are on the future email lists for those topics. Thank you very much. Have a great Friday.
Thank you, and thanks for having us.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Take care. Have a good day.